The fact, Justin Boone, that we are saying Trey McBride or Marvin Harrison Jr., who is the better dynasty asset right now? I think if we were having this conversation 365 days ago, people might have been tearing us apart in the YouTube comments. You know what I'm saying? Like Marvin Harrison Jr. was pretty much the consensus 1.01. I mean, I've said this all throughout draft season that if you liked Neighbors better than Harrison or a Dunze I thought was in that same tier, I would not have fought you for a second on it. So like that at the same time, though, he generally was the top ranked rookie last year. And I really loved him as a prospect. But the fact that not only are we having this conversation, Boone, but Harrison went like 4 picks after Trey McBride in our draft. And I don't think that's crazy. It's pretty wild that we've gotten to this point. Where do you stand on this particular debate here?
Well, I think it's also important to bring up, this was not a tight end premium mock either. If anyone's looking at this and going, well, of course it's tight end premium, so that's why you take McBride. It is not. And yet still he went 4 spots higher, right? And I totally agree with you. If we were having this conversation last year, they might have just like midway through the show just canceled us and not let us get back on the air, right? Like they would have thought we were out of our minds. And yet, like you look at it last year, like what McBride did, like he really established himself as a difference maker at tight end for fantasy. He finished just behind George Kittle in terms of fantasy points per game. He was 0.1 points per game behind Kittle. And you know, that was with only scoring 2 touchdowns on 111 catches, which is another thing that is just completely insane. And I cannot imagine seeing that happen again. We're going to see some regression there for him. He's going to get in the end zone more. It was so strange last year. Like even when they were trying to get him a touchdown late in the year, like, and it still wasn't working out. It was the weirdest scenario. It was like there was a curse against him or something, but 111 catches, like from the tight end spot. Very few tight ends have that ability or get that kind of volume. So McBride really, really setting himself apart and putting him into that, you know, truly elite category of tight ends with Brock Bowers, who he actually finished ahead of last year by, you know, 0.1, I believe it was as well. And yet still the touchdowns didn't have it and finished ahead of Brock Bowers. Now this year, will that continue? I think it's going to be close. Like in redraft, I think McBride is probably the smarter pick because you get him at a little cheaper cost and has the same kind of upside, I think, as Bowers does. But you look at these guys, I mean, it really comes down to, and I want to hear your take on Harrison. It really comes down to what you think Harrison is going to be. And he was a victim of great expectations last year for sure. Like we all thought, or at least I did, that he was going to come in and he had the name and he had the family and he had the college stats and he had the draft capital. And it just seemed like a complete slam dunk that this guy was going to come in and have a great NFL career. And yet not every player comes in and does that. Some guys need some time to acclimate themselves to the pros, to figure out how to win at the next level. And maybe that's the case with him. There's also some things, you know, in that offense that I don't think they were necessarily doing him a lot of favors, but 62 catches, 885 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I think a lot of people forget the guy had 8 touchdowns last year as well. So it wasn't like he did nothing as a rookie. Just he didn't come in and put up 1,500 yards right away like I think a lot of people expected him to do. I do think one of the biggest problems, though, is the way he's used on that offense. And the question is that going to change this year? Like we see a great highlight coming out of camp, right, where he's making this one-handed catch and it's amazing. And yet again, he's running down the sidelines outside of the numbers. He's holding off a defender with one arm and he's catching the ball with the other. That's kind of what it was last year. It's like they expect him just to be so good that he's going to overcome no matter what the defense does. They're not doing anything to really get him like these easy shots. Hopefully that changes. Will it change? I don't really know. Like there's not a ton of changes around him in terms of the personnel, the coaching, and all that sort of stuff. So do we think that he could still hit that ceiling? I do think it's still there for him. We see him dedicate himself to the game. I think he's that kind of player where he's living and breathing football. You see the physique change this year, right? Like he looks a lot different. He's clearly been in the weight room. He wants this. He is going to dedicate himself to get it. And I hope that they give him a little bit of help in terms of the way they call that offense. And I also hope that he could just take the next level in his game as well. But let's hear the reception perception take on Harrison and what that could mean for him versus McBride in Dynasty.
Well, yeah, I obviously want to talk about Harrison, but I think actually starting with McBride is the best way to do this, because I really don't think there's any problem. Like, the question is not really here is Trey McBride, did he go too high, or is he overrated in dynasty? Because I think the quick answer to that's just no. Like, him as a top of the third round startup pick is totally fair and totally defensible. The question is really just, can Marvin Harrison Jr., can he leap higher than what he was last year? Can he be one of these guys that we're going to get to in the third section of the show, like a guy that could be in the first round conversation? And I think that's the bigger question, because with McBride, man, the guy, according to Fantasy Points data, the guy had a 33.6% share of the first three targets in Arizona last year. That was number one among all tight ends. He was the only one over 30%, and it was 10th in the NFL overall. He was just 0.1 percentage off of Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, maybe one of at worst, the second best receiver in the league, maybe the best receiver in football. That, like I said, his offense does a great job to design things for him to get shot plays down the field. Like, that's how dominant Trey McBride was in terms of being like a guy that was the first read in the concept. So he is one of these, you and I talk about, oh yeah, we want a tight end to be one of the first two targets on his team. But Trey McBride, he locked in one of those top two spots, and he was really good and a really efficient and effective producer in that role. So I don't think he's going away. The question is just, can Marvin Harrison make this a situation where, like with the Eagles last year, both of those guys were over 33%. And like, obviously some of this is they missed games, right? AJ Brown missed time. Devontae Smith only played in 13 games, but these were both two guys that were 33% in terms of earning the first read targets there. Whereas Marvin Harrison is the 32nd in the NFL. He's like 27%. Like, he needs to make this we've got two like alpha targeters, which is totally possible because they play two different positions. And I think you're right to hit on a couple of things there. Number one, Marvin Harrison Jr., like he does need to get bigger, faster, stronger. And as you mentioned, like, he looks great. He's gained a little bit of weight. I don't think that means he has to be slow or anything, because when you look at Harrison, like, again, I don't want to retcon the prospect profile for Harrison, but we never got any athletic testing on him. And from a measurements standpoint, he was sub 215 pounds, 47th percentile arm length, 21st percentile hand size. So he wasn't this like Calvin Johnson-esque physical freak. He was really like a souped up version of, like, a bigger version of his father, which was like a craftsman level route runner. And I think you saw that, and that kind of comes back to the usage part of this. So among players I tracked last year, Boone, for like from last season for reception perception, it's very rare that you see guys at or above 80% and outside and on the line of scrimmage players. So those like classic X receivers. A few of the guys that did that: Quentin Johnston, Nico Collins, which, by the way, just shows you what a baller Nico Collins is. And it was that way in 2023 as well. George Pickens, Marvin Harrison Jr., DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton. And if you go back to 2023, I'll throw a few more names there that were over 80% snaps outside and on the line of scrimmage. Once again, Nico Collins, Rashad Bateman, Devontae Adams, Brandon Ayuk. Again, shows you what a baller Brandon Ayuk was in 2023. And like, that's it. That's the list. It's a very rare and very like old school usage. Like, some of the names I'm throwing out there, like the guy that you take fourth overall in the draft that you want to be like your elite number one wide receiver, you don't want him in the Quentin Johnston role. You don't want him in the George Pickens role. You don't want him in the I love Rashad Bateman. You don't want him in the Rashad Bateman role. I mean, Devontae Adams, the Jets like never used him that way. The freaking Packers never used him that way. It was only in kind of like McDaniels's very old school Raiders offense. So it's just, you don't love that. That has to change. But to your question, Boone, like, does it change? Because this team made zero personnel adjustments on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't add any pass catchers, anything like that, because they needed to hit their defense hard. So what we need to see basically is like, okay, Michael Wilson has to take some like sacrificial X receiver reps away from Marvin Harrison Jr., which I think is possible, because I actually thought it was going to happen last year. Michael Wilson at the end of his rookie season had like 3 games at the end of the year where he played X receiver because Marquise Brown was hurt. And I thought he played pretty well in those moments, but they just never used him like that again. So I don't know. It's one of those things where it's kind of a close your eyes and bet on talent thing with Harrison, and a close your eyes and bet on rational coaching thing with Harrison, because Like the quarterback's not going to change. I think Harrison was really good last year and can be even better in isolation this year. So really it's about the usage and just like the ascension of a player, because we're not going to get any sort of signals like, oh yeah, now he's going to be like a 30% slot player or something like that.
All right, so let's get your answer here. If it's McBride versus Harrison, if that was your pick, who would you take?
I mean, I just did all that talking, and you're going to make me answer the hard question. You're going to actually make me answer the question that I asked. How dare you?
I'll buy you some time. I'll be happy to answer it myself. I'm still taking Harrison. I'm still taking the guy that I think does have that upside at receiver. He has the age that we're looking for in a dynasty prospect. When you put all that together, I'm still going to chase that. And a big part of this between these two comes down to it not being tight end premium. Like if it's tight end premium, it's not even close. We're taking McBride. And I do also wonder if a big part of this just comes down to the touchdowns last year. Like if McBride ends up scoring 5 touchdowns and he finishes as the number 1 overall tight end, and is he going in round 1 right now? I think he might be, right? Is he going ahead of Bowers? Probably not, but at worst, he's probably an early second round pick, even in non-tight end premium. Like, I think sometimes those things can really, swing a discussion. I'm still going to chase Harrison. I'm still going to chase that guy that I think can be one of those, receivers that ends up giving you a really good career, even if I'm a little less confident that that's going to happen, or maybe even a lot less confident that he's going to hit that ceiling outcome now. I still think there's a chance, and I still would chase that here versus taking a tight end who's going to be really good, but McBride's like 26, I think. You get some good seasons out of him, a little bit older though. Not quite the young guy that like a Bowers would be, where you look at Bowers and go, man, he's probably going to be around for 10 years in my lineup, just dominating. But McBride is a heck of a player. Both these guys are good players. I think they both deserve to go early in drafts like this, in the 3rd round, maybe even in the late 2nd round. I thought hard about taking Harrison with my pick in the early 3rd round. I passed on him for the safer pick, which I thought was the quarterback. But if I have to pick between these two, I'm giving Harrison the slight edge. I bought you some time. What's your answer now?
Yeah, my answer was going to be Harrison too, so it's fine. The reality is, like with these guys, it's just he checks a lot of boxes in isolation that I want to bet on. As somebody that was like an over 80% success rate versus zone player, was really good against press coverage, 80th percentile in reception perception year 1. This is the thing. Like he doesn't need this role change to be a good player, because he can just be even better in his second season. It's just it will make life a lot easier. And all those players I've just listed off there, you notice that I didn't list off names like any of these second-year receivers that we're really excited about, like Neighbors and BTJ. You notice I didn't list like friggin' Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. Like this is not even AJ Brown. Like this is not the way that most teams use their number 1 wide receiver. And I think hopefully we will see that change. I think again, it's like minor clues, but I do think we'll see some changes this year. I'll be a little surprised if he's 80-80 again this year. So I'll go with Harrison as well.
All right. And I have one more thing to add here. I bring up my fantasy strength of schedule matrix a whole bunch. The Cardinals have the 12th easiest fantasy schedule for receivers this year. So you go, okay, that's not bad for Harrison. They have the 2nd easiest tight end fantasy schedule. So if you need another reason to think McBride could have another monster year, maybe actually have a bunch of touchdowns, there you go. 2nd easiest schedule in the league for McBride this year.